The town of Marrow Creek looked like a postcard when October came. Children dragged plastic pumpkins through rustling leaves, porch lights glowed orange, and every window seemed to flicker with the reflection of candlelight. But to Eleanor Graye, the season felt wrong this year, as if the air itself was holding its breath. She had come back after 15 years, answering a letter that shouldn't have existed. Her mother had been dead for almost 2 decades, and yet the handwriting on the envelope had been unmistakable. "Come home for Halloween. You left something behind." Eleanor parked outside the old gray house at the edge of Ash Willow Lane. It sat apart from the rest of town, an old Victorian with gray shutters and a wide porch that sagged like a frown. The pumpkins on the steps were freshly carved, their grins jagged and wet. She hadn't done that. Her fingers trembled as she picked up one of the candles inside a jack-o'-lantern. It was still warm. Someone had lit it less than an hour ago. The house unlocked easily. The air inside was cold and smelled faintly of cinnamon and mildew. The wallpaper, once floral, had peeled into strange shapes. The old grandfather clock in the hall, the one that had stopped the night her mother died, ticked again, slow and deliberate. Eleanor whispered, "Mom." Silence. She wandered through the living room, brushing her hand over the old piano. There was a small pumpkin on top of it, carved with a crooked face, the same crooked smile her mother used to draw on notes in Eleanor's lunchbox. She almost laughed, almost cried. The house was full of echoes. When she reached the kitchen, she saw something that stopped her breath. The table was set for two. 2 plates, 2 cups of steaming tea. Steam. The tea was fresh. Her first thought was, someone's here. Her second was worse, someone knew I was coming. "Hello?" she called. Her voice sounded smaller than she remembered. No answer. Only the faint ticking of the clock behind her, then, softly, a whisper. She froze. "You shouldn't have left me, Ellie." It was her mother's voice, as clear as day. But it came from behind the kitchen wall. Eleanor staggered back, heart pounding. The wall was solid, yet she could swear she saw something move under the wallpaper, like a shadow sliding behind it. Her eyes darted to the pumpkins outside the kitchen window. They weren't just glowing anymore. Their carved faces seemed to shift slightly when she wasn't looking, as if their smiles were widening. She told herself she was tired, that the long drive was playing tricks on her. But when she looked down at the table, one of the teacups had moved. A trail of tea had spilled across the lace cloth, shaping itself into a single word. Eleanor's legs went weak. She backed into the hall, staring at the whispering wallpaper, at the silent, ticking clock. The house groaned, as if something deep in its bones was waking up. Outside, the neighborhood was perfectly still. No wind. No children's laughter. No sound except for the low hum of the jack-o'-lanterns flickering on the porch. And for the first time since she arrived, Eleanor realized what was truly wrong with Marrow Creek. There were no other pumpkins on any porch. Only hers, all freshly carved, all watching. She didn't remember carving them. But she remembered the smell of pumpkin on her hands when she'd opened the letter. Eleanor barely slept that first night in the house on Ash Willow Lane. She tried to tell herself it was jet lag, the silence, the way old homes breathe and creak when the temperature drops. But no amount of reason could explain the whispering that came from inside the walls. It began around 2:13 a.m. A soft scratching, like fingernails tracing wallpaper. Then a voice, her mother's voice again, faint and broken, like a radio caught between stations. "You left me here, Ellie. You left me alone in the dark." Eleanor sat upright on the couch, her pulse hammering. "Who's there?" she whispered. The voice didn't answer. Only the clock ticked in reply, each second heavier than the last. She grabbed her phone for light and aimed it toward the hallway. The glow cut through the dark, landing on the peeling wallpaper. Something wet glistened there, a faint outline of a handprint, pressed from inside the wall. Her phone flickered. The battery dropped from 42% to 1%. Then the screen went black. Eleanor stood frozen. Her breath came out in visible puffs. The house had grown colder. In the silence that followed, she heard a new sound, a soft drip drip drip, coming from the dining room. She followed it, each step echoing against the old wooden floorboards. The table still stood where she'd left it, with the 2 teacups. But one was now on the floor, shattered, and from the shards seeped something dark, thicker than tea. Blood. She stumbled backward, hitting the sideboard. The mirror above it rattled, and in that moment she saw movement, not behind her, but in the reflection. A woman's shape, standing just beyond the kitchen doorway, her hair falling over one side of her face. Eleanor spun around. No one was there. Her voice cracked. "Mom." A soft rustle answered from the hallway, the sound of skirts brushing wood, moving away. Eleanor followed, heart racing, all reason slipping from her grip. The figure led her toward the stairs, and for a split second, as lightning flashed outside, Eleanor saw something at the top landing. A door she didn't remember. When she was a child, the upstairs hallway had 3 doors, hers, her parents', and the bathroom. But now, between them, was another, narrow, painted black, with no handle. Eleanor climbed slowly, each step groaning beneath her. The door seemed to hum faintly, like something behind it was breathing. She reached out and pressed her palm to it. It was warm. "Mom, are you in there?" Nothing. But from behind the door came a single, hollow thud, then a whisper, so close it might have been in her ear. "Find what you buried." Eleanor stumbled back, nearly falling down the stairs. When she looked again, the door was gone. Just a stretch of wall, painted the same pale yellow as the rest of the hall. Her breath hitched. "No," she murmured, stepping closer. She touched the spot where the door had been, and her fingers brushed against a faint line, as if the frame were still beneath the paint. Downstairs, something crashed, glass shattering. Eleanor bolted down, pulse thudding in her ears. The living room window was cracked open, the curtain fluttering. On the piano, the small pumpkin's candle had gone out. But the face carved into it had changed. The smile was gone. Now it frowned. And carved beneath it were 3 words that hadn't been there before. "You buried me." Eleanor screamed. She stumbled backward, hitting the wall, and the whispering began again, louder this time, filling every room at once, as if the house itself were speaking. "Find it, Ellie. Find what you buried. Before I do." Her knees gave out. She clutched her head, shaking, whispering, "It's not real. It's not real." But outside, through the cracked window, she saw movement, dozens of faint orange glows lining the street. Pumpkins. New ones. Every porch on Ash Willow Lane now had a jack-o'-lantern, their faces identical to hers. And as she stared, she swore they were all turned toward her house. Morning crept into Marrow Creek pale and reluctant. A low mist rolled through the streets, turning every mailbox and lawn ornament into a silhouette. Eleanor sat on the porch wrapped in her coat, staring at the pumpkins. In daylight they looked harmless, simple orange shells, their candle wax melted into puddles. But each one still bore that same carved frown, the same hollow eyes that seemed to follow her. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She told herself she'd dreamt everything, the voices, the door, the blood. But when she looked through the broken window, the shards of the teacup were still there, the stain on the floor dark as dried rust. She needed proof of her sanity, someone else to see. She walked into town. The streets were unusually quiet for Halloween morning. The diner, once buzzing, was empty except for an elderly waitress who eyed Eleanor like she was a ghost herself. "Back visiting?" the woman asked, wiping her hands on a rag. Eleanor nodded. "Just for a few days. I grew up here." The waitress frowned. "You're a Graye, aren't you?" Thought you moved away after your mama. Eleanor hesitated. What about her? The woman glanced around, then leaned in. People said she was never the same after your daddy passed. Used to see her wandering by the creek at night, talking to shadows. Then that Halloween, she went missing. They never found her. House has been empty since. Eleanor's mouth went dry. You mean they never found a body? Not so much as a shoe, the waitress said softly. Only thing they did find was a hole out back by your old garden. Half dug. Like someone stopped before finishing. The air felt thinner. Eleanor forced a smile, paid for coffee she couldn't drink, and hurried out. As she walked back toward the house, the fog thickened. The trees along Ash Willow Lane looked like tall, crooked figures bowing toward her. She tried to remember that Halloween, the last before she'd left for college, but her memories came in fragments, her mother crying, the smell of earth, the scrape of a shovel. She reached the yard and saw the patch of garden behind the house, overgrown, but still marked by a line of half-buried stones. A part of her wanted to run. Another part needed to know. She found the old shed and, after some searching, a rusted shovel. Its handle fit perfectly in her grip. The first thrust into the soil sent a jolt through her arms. The earth was soft, almost too soft. Each scoop brought up the scent of decay, of something long hidden. After several minutes she hit something solid. Not a rock, wood. Her breath caught. She cleared the dirt away and revealed a small wooden box, the kind her mother had used to keep keepsakes and recipes. It was sealed shut with black tape. Hands trembling, she peeled the tape back. Inside lay a handful of objects wrapped in cloth. A silver locket she'd thought lost years ago. A faded photo of her and her mother, smiling before a field of pumpkins. And something else, a folded piece of paper, yellowed and stiff. She opened it. The handwriting was her mother's. Ellie, if you read this, I couldn't stop it. The house won't let me leave. The pumpkins are its eyes, they watch until they find what they want. If it whispers to you, don't listen. Burn the seeds. Eleanor's stomach turned. Beneath the paper was a small cloth pouch, heavy and cold. She opened it carefully and spilled its contents into her palm, pumpkin seeds, black as ash. A sound drifted from the house, the front door creaking open. She froze, listening. The wind didn't move, but the door swung wider, slow and deliberate. From inside came that same voice, tender and cruel all at once. You found it, Ellie. Now plant it. The seeds slipped from her hand. They scattered into the dirt, and for an instant, the ground moved, a pulse beneath the soil. Eleanor backed away, heart hammering. The whispering rose again, now surrounding her, coming from the walls, the air, the pumpkins. Plant it. Feed it. Finish what you started. Then silence. Eleanor stared at the disturbed earth. Something was pushing upward from beneath, thin tendrils, pale as bone, curling toward the surface like roots seeking light. She ran. Back inside, she slammed the door, bolted it, and collapsed against the wall. The grandfather clock ticked calmly, oblivious. But in the reflection of its glass, she saw movement behind her, a figure standing in the kitchen doorway, face hidden by hair, dripping with mud. The whisper came again, soft and broken. You buried me wrong. And something else, a folded piece of paper, yellowed and stiff. She opened it. The handwriting was her mother's. Ellie, if you read this, I couldn't stop it. The house won't let me leave. The pumpkins are its eyes, they watch until they find what they want. If it whispers to you, don't listen. Burn the seeds. Eleanor's stomach turned. Beneath the paper was a small cloth pouch, heavy and cold. She opened it carefully and spilled its contents into her palm, pumpkin seeds, black as ash. A sound drifted from the house, the front door creaking open. She froze, listening. The wind didn't move, but the door swung wider, slow and deliberate. From inside came that same voice, tender and cruel all at once. "You found it, Ellie. Now plant it." The seeds slipped from her hand. They scattered into the dirt, and for an instant, the ground moved, a pulse beneath the soil. Eleanor backed away, heart hammering. The whispering rose again, now surrounding her, coming from the walls, the air, the pumpkins. "Plant it. Feed it. Finish what you started." Then silence. Eleanor stared at the disturbed earth. Something was pushing upward from beneath, thin tendrils, pale as bone, curling toward the surface like roots seeking light. She ran. Back inside, she slammed the door, bolted it, and collapsed against the wall. The grandfather clock ticked calmly, oblivious. But in the reflection of its glass, she saw movement behind her, a figure standing in the kitchen doorway, face hidden by hair, dripping with mud. The whisper came again, soft and broken. "You buried me wrong." Eleanor waited until nightfall. She didn't know why she waited, only that the house felt more awake after dark. The air pressed in close, heavy with the smell of damp earth and wax. She had gathered the seeds in a ceramic bowl, careful not to touch them for long. They seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light, as if tiny hearts beat inside them. Every time she turned away, she swore they shifted slightly, rearranging themselves into shapes she almost recognized, letters, maybe words. By 7 o'clock, the fog had rolled back in, thicker than ever. The world outside looked reduced to silhouettes, fences, trees, distant porch lights glowing like dull embers. Eleanor carried the bowl out to the yard, a can of lighter fluid tucked under her arm. "Burn them," she whispered. That's what she wanted. The garden soil still bore the marks of her digging. The air smelled faintly of rot. She poured the lighter fluid over the seeds, struck a match, and dropped it in. For a moment, relief, a hiss, a brief flare of orange. Then the fire died. The seeds were untouched. Not even scorched. She lit another match. This one went out before it touched them, as though the air itself refused to burn. Eleanor's hands began to shake. She poured more fluid, enough to drench her shoes, and dropped another flame. Nothing. That was when the ground began to move. Softly at first, a ripple through the soil, then a slow bulge rising beneath the patch where she'd buried the seeds. Something was growing. She stumbled back, tripping over a stone, watching in horror as tendrils of white roots snaked upward like grasping fingers. Within seconds, a small stem broke the surface. Then another. In less than a minute, she was staring at a full-grown pumpkin vine, its leaves pale and trembling. "This isn't happening," she muttered. But it was. At the base of the vine, a single pumpkin had already formed, small, gray, slick with dew. Its skin pulsed faintly, as though something inside it was breathing. And then came the whisper, curling through the fog. "You can't burn what's already been planted." Eleanor spun around, heart in her throat. The voice seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the ground, from the air, from inside her head. The back door creaked open by itself. Warm candlelight spilled out, flickering across the yard. The pumpkins on the porch had lit again, one by one, their carved faces glowing like watchful eyes. "Come inside, Ellie. It's cold." Her mother's voice again. Soft, gentle, the way it had sounded when Eleanor was 6 and afraid of thunderstorms. But when she turned toward the house, she saw a figure standing just inside the doorway, a silhouette, hair falling across its face, one hand resting against the frame. The figure smiled. Not kindly. Eleanor backed away, shaking her head. "You're not her." The smile didn't fade. The figure raised its hand and pointed to the ground. The pumpkin at her feet had split open. From the crack spilled not pulp but something darker, thin threads of black smoke, swirling like breath. And beneath that, just visible through the opening, a glint of metal. She hesitated, then knelt. The metal was a ring, her mother's wedding band. She'd been buried here. The world tilted. Eleanor dropped the ring, stumbling backward. The whispering became a roar, countless voices, layered, angry, pleading. The fog thickened until she could barely see her hands. The porch light flickered. The figure in the doorway was gone. Eleanor ran inside and slammed the door. Her hands were covered in soil and ash that didn't come off no matter how hard she rubbed. She fell against the counter, gasping, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Behind her reflection stood another. Her mother. The reflection's lips moved, and though no sound came through the glass, Eleanor understood every word. "You planted me." The kitchen lights flickered, then died. The only glow came from the pumpkins outside, their faces now pressed against the window glass, eyes burning like coals. Each one whispered in unison, soft and rhythmic, almost like a lullaby. "Plant, grow, harvest. Plant, grow, harvest." Eleanor covered her ears, sank to the floor, and screamed. The next thing she knew, it was morning. The light was gray and thin. The bowl of seeds was gone. But when she stepped outside, there were dozens of vines creeping through the yard, twisting toward the porch, all sprouting small, gray pumpkins, each one marked with the same carved frown. And beneath one of them, half buried in the dirt, something white gleamed, not a stone. A fragment of bone. By the fifth morning the fog never lifted. Marrow Creek felt suspended in it, no sound of cars, no chatter from the main street, only the slow ticking of time. Eleanor stood at the window and counted the pumpkins. There were 32 now, lined like sentinels around the porch and the yard. Their faces no longer frowning, blank this time, as though waiting to be carved. She decided to find answers in the one place that might still remember, the library. The town library sat beside the church, a narrow brick building that smelled of dust and pine oil. The librarian, Mr. Calder, looked startled when she introduced herself. "Eleanor Graye," she said. He blinked. "You're Martha Gray's daughter." The name seemed to weigh on him. He led her to a corner table and disappeared into the archives, returning with a single thin folder. On its label, ASH Willow Lane Incident, 1998. Inside were yellowed clippings. Local woman missing on Halloween. Unusual crop patterns discovered near creek. Residents report strange lights. And one grainy photograph, a group of people standing in a ring of pumpkins at night. At the center, her mother. Beneath the photo someone had scrawled in pencil. "Harvest circle, offer the seeds, guard the gate." Eleanor's stomach turned. "What was this?" she asked. Calder hesitated. "Old town tradition. Long before the subdivisions. Folks believe the soil here remembers the dead. Each Halloween they buried a handful of seeds for those they'd lost. But one year, something answered back. Your mother tried to end it." "And what?" "The harvest," he said simply. "After she vanished, no one held it again. Or so we thought." Eleanor left the library with the folder clutched tight. The fog had thickened, carrying a faint hum, almost musical, drifting from the direction of her street. By the time she reached Ash Willow Lane, the hum had become a chant. Low, steady, rising and falling like breath. The pumpkins glowed brighter, their light pulsing in rhythm. Someone, or something, was calling them to life. Inside, the grandfather clock chimed even though its hands showed noon. The sound was deep enough to rattle the windows. The walls quivered, the wallpaper shifting like skin. Eleanor spread the old photograph on the table. She studied her mother's face, half shadowed, half smiling. The circle of pumpkins around her looked eerily familiar. She stepped outside. The vines had reached the fence. The newest pumpkins were arranged in a perfect ring, their stems curling inward. In the center of the ring the soil had sunk, forming a shallow hollow the size of a grave. Eleanor whispered, "No." But the ground answered with a sigh, a slow exhale of mist. She ran for the shed, grabbed the shovel again, and began to dig, out, not down, tearing through the vines, cutting them apart. Each time the metal bit earth, the air filled with that faint chant. Then she saw movement beyond the fence. Figures emerging from the fog, neighbors, perhaps, but their faces were wrong, too smooth in the dim light, their eyes reflecting orange like candle flames. They carried pumpkins in their arms. "Stay away," she shouted. They didn't answer. They stepped forward silently and placed their pumpkins along the edge of her yard, completing the circle. Eleanor dropped the shovel and ran back inside, bolting the door. Through the window she watched them turn and disappear into the mist, leaving the ring to glow by itself. When she looked again at the photograph, the faces had changed. Her mother was gone. In her place stood Eleanor, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if the image had been waiting for her all along. The clock ticked once more. Outside, the pumpkins whispered together, soft and almost kind. "One must keep the harvest, Ellie. One must always stay." Eleanor backed away until her shoulders hit the wall. For the first time she realized the whisper wasn't entirely outside, part of it came from inside her own chest, echoing in rhythm with her pulse. Night returned to Marrow Creek like a tide of shadow. The fog thickened until it seemed to breathe, moving with the rhythm of Eleanor's heart. Every window in the Graye house glowed faintly orange from the ring of pumpkins outside. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table with the photograph and the folder spread before her. The words "guard the gate" echoed again and again. She traced the faces in the photo, the way her mother stood at the circle's center, eyes lifted as if listening to something no one else could hear. That's when the clock chimed, once, then twice, then again, counting past 12, past logic, until the sound filled every corner of the house. The vibration made the photograph tremble. From somewhere beneath her feet came another sound, a muffled tapping, slow and steady. Eleanor rose and followed it through the hallway to the cellar door. She hesitated, hand hovering above the handle. The door hadn't been opened since she was a child. Her mother had kept it locked, claiming the floorboards below were unsafe. Now the lock hung broken. The tapping continued. She descended slowly, flashlight shaking in her hand. The beam caught rows of jars, old tools, a collapsed shelf. Dust shimmered in the beam like fog underwater. In the far corner stood a shape draped in a sheet. The tapping came from beneath it. Eleanor pulled the sheet away. Beneath was the old root cellar door, wooden planks reinforced with nails, a thick iron latch holding it shut. The tapping stopped. Then came the voice, faint, muffled, almost tender. "Ellie, you have to finish it." Her knees weakened. "Mom. The gate's opening. You have to close it before it takes them all." Eleanor stared at the sealed hatch. Her flashlight flickered once, twice, then went out. In the dark she could feel warmth seeping through the cracks, a pulse, steady and alive. Something down there was moving. She stumbled back, tripping on a step, and the whispering from the yard returned, seeping through the cellar windows. The pumpkin's glow spilled faintly across the floorboards, forming shifting patterns that looked almost like veins. She ran upstairs, slamming the cellar door behind her. The house seemed to hum, every wall alive with vibration. The air tasted of earth and smoke. In the kitchen window, her reflection watched her with eyes slightly delayed, as if something inside the glass were lagging behind time. She whispered, "What are you?" Her reflection smiled, a slow, wrong smile. "We are what you planted." The reflection raised its hand, mirroring hers, and pointed toward the yard. Outside, the ring of pumpkins had split open. The vines were crawling inward now, converging at the hollow center. The ground pulsed like a heartbeat. Eleanor grabbed the photograph and ran for the door, stepping onto the porch as the air turned colder. The chant returned, louder now, carried on the wind. Plant, grow, harvest. Guard the gate. She realized the pumpkins weren't whispering alone anymore. The voices came from beneath the ground, countless whispers rising like steam from the soil. She stepped toward the circle. The earth shifted under her feet, soft and wet. Then she saw it, a faint light glowing deep below the hollow, pale and golden, flickering like fire underwater. A doorway. And through it, she could see movement, shapes, shadows, something vast turning slowly in the dark. Her mother's voice echoed again, clear now, filled with urgency. "It's hungry, Ellie. Close it before it remembers you." Eleanor fell to her knees, digging her hands into the cold soil. She began pulling at the vines, tearing them loose, screaming, "How?" The voice answered, quieter now, almost fading. "You must give it back what you took." "What I took?" The light beneath the earth flared. The photograph in her hand caught fire without heat, the image of her mother curling into ash. Beneath the ash was another image, faint but visible. A child. Eleanor, no older than 7, standing beside a smaller mound of earth, smiling, shovel in hand. Memory slammed into her like a storm. Her mother's screams that Halloween. The way Eleanor had helped plant the seeds. How she buried something her mother had begged her not to. The chanting reached a fevered pitch. The pumpkin's eyes flared white, then black, then went out altogether. The hollow yawned wider, the soil splitting open like a mouth. Eleanor screamed and stumbled back toward the house. She slammed the door, pressed her back against it, breathing hard. The whispering slowed, then stopped. Silence. Then a final voice, calm and near her ear. "It's open now." The floorboards beneath her feet began to tremble. Halloween night came without stars. The fog was so dense it turned every light into a halo. From the center of Marrow Creek came the faint peal of a bell, slow and wrong, as if time itself had slipped. Inside the gray house, Eleanor sat on the living room floor surrounded by flickering candles. The photograph had burned to gray ash, the air still smelled of smoke and wet earth. Every few minutes the house shuddered, dust falling from the ceiling. The whispering had returned, softer now, coaxing. "Come down, Ellie. You started this." She covered her ears. "I was a child," she whispered. "I didn't know." A pulse ran through the floorboards, boom, 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 like a heartbeat beneath the house. The pumpkins outside glowed in unison, their carved mouths opening wider until the light spilled across the windows in molten orange. Eleanor knew the gate was fully awake. She also knew that if she didn't close it before midnight, the thing beneath would crawl through. She lit the last candle and found the shovel leaning by the door. Her mother's ring still hung from her neck. "I'll finish it for you," she said. The cellar door waited, breathing warmth into the hallway. When she descended, the glow beneath the hatch had turned crimson gold, the boards trembling against their nails. She crouched beside it, whispered, "What do you want from me?" The reply came from below, layered with countless voices, her mother's among them. "A keeper. Always a keeper." Eleanor felt it then, the pull of the soil, of memory itself. The ring around her neck grew hot, the metal etched a perfect circle against her skin. She understood. Every generation had left someone behind to hold the gate shut from the inside. Her mother had tried to spare her, but the ritual had already chosen. Tears stung her eyes. No. The hatch cracked down the center. A wind poured out, carrying the smell of autumn leaves and something far older. The candles upstairs blew out one by one. She raised the shovel and struck the boards. The blow echoed like thunder. Again and again until splinters flew and the crimson light burst upward, blinding her. When her vision cleared, she saw a void below, shifting earth and endless pumpkins growing in spirals, their hollow faces watching. At the center stood her mother, pale and still, half made of roots. Ellie, the figure said, smiling sadly, if the gate stays open, they all wake. You have to trade a life for it to close. Eleanor shook her head. Take me, then. Let them go. Her mother's expression softened. That's what I did. That's why it called you back. The house groaned. The hole widened. Wind howled through the cellar, scattering papers and dust. Eleanor dropped the shovel and crawled toward the edge, gripping the ring. Tell me what to do. Return the seed. From her pocket she drew one of the black seeds she hadn't managed to burn. It pulsed faintly in her palm. She leaned over the glowing pit and let it fall. The wind stopped. The light flared once, then folded inward. The ground sealed itself like closing skin. Eleanor collapsed on the floor, shaking. The cellar went dark except for the soft amber of the ring, now cool again. Above her, the house exhaled, wood settling, glass humming. The pumpkins outside flickered and went out. Silence. She climbed the stairs, each step heavier than the last. When she reached the living room, dawn light was seeping through the curtains. The fog had thinned. Eleanor opened the front door. The yard was empty. No pumpkins, no vines, just churned earth. For the first time in days, she felt the air move freely. She almost smiled, until she saw the soil by the porch shift once more, a small bulge pushing upward. A single green shoot broke the surface, curling toward her. Morning came pale and fragile, washing the town in cold blue light. Eleanor stood on her porch, barefoot, watching the mist creep across the fields. The last thing she remembered was the seed sinking into the glowing earth and the world folding shut like a wound. Now everything was quiet. Too quiet. The street was empty. No children's laughter, no barking dogs, no car engines. The houses stood motionless, curtains drawn. The stillness pressed against her chest until she felt she might break. She turned back toward the gray house. Its windows were fogged from the inside. She could see her own reflection in the glass, pale, streaked with dirt, eyes ringed in sleepless hollows. You did it, she told herself. You stopped it. The thought felt hollow. When she stepped inside, the air was thick with the smell of rain and soil. The candles had burned down to puddles of wax. The cellar door hung open, but the light below was gone. Only darkness remained, and the faintest sound of breathing, like wind through leaves. Eleanor closed the door and locked it. She whispered, "Stay asleep." For a moment, the silence agreed. She wandered the house, touching the walls, the furniture. Everything was subtly wrong, a chair an inch off where it should be, the wallpaper pattern misaligned. Her reflection in a hallway mirror seemed a fraction too slow again, as if the world were still catching up to itself. At the kitchen window, she noticed movement outside. Someone was standing in the yard. A woman. Eleanor's breath caught. It was her mother, or something that wore her shape. Pale skin, eyes dark as soil, hair damp with fog. She smiled gently and beckoned. "It's closed now," the figure said. "But it will open again. That's what it does." Eleanor's voice trembled. "Then what happens to me? Every gate needs a keeper." The world seemed to tilt. The fog rolled closer, curling around the house like smoke. From the ground rose the faint outlines of pumpkins, thousands of them, half-formed, breathing softly. The woman stepped closer. Her feet left no prints. "You're its memory now, Eleanor. You'll keep it dreaming." Eleanor shook her head. "No. I can leave. I'll." But her voice faltered. Her hands were no longer shaking. They were steady, too steady, her skin dusted with the same faint orange glow that had lived inside the pumpkins. The realization came like a blade of ice. She hadn't escaped the gate. She had become part of it. A low hum filled the air, deep, rhythmic, almost soothing. The soil in the yard began to ripple, the vines twitching as if in a slow heartbeat. Eleanor stepped off the porch and walked toward her mother's shape. "I'll keep them safe," she whispered. "Like you did." "That's my girl," the figure said, fading into the mist. Eleanor stopped at the center of the yard where the hollow had been. The earth was smooth now, but warm under her feet. She knelt and placed her hand on it. The soil pulsed once, acknowledging her. From the horizon came the distant sound of children laughing, faint and unreal. The town was waking, forgetting the night entirely. Eleanor smiled faintly. "Happy Halloween," she whispered. And as the sun climbed higher, the mist swallowed the gray house, leaving nothing but a field of uncarved pumpkins stretching as far as the eye could see, each one with the faintest flicker of light deep inside, like tiny, dreaming hearts.